What if dust could remember? For billions of years, the sands of Mars have slept, cold, red, and patient. Each grain, a fragment of stories older than life itself. But lately, something has been stirring within that silence, something that makes even the most skeptical scientist pause before speaking. The Martian dust is moving. Not in storms, not in wind, but in ways that defy physics. Slow ripples that crawl across flat terrain, forming patterns that appear, vanish, and reappear hundreds of kilometers away. Patterns that match the pulse of 3I Atlas. The first evidence came from the ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter. A routine imaging sequence over Elysium Planitia showed faint, curling ridges that weren't there a sol before. They weren't dunes. They weren't the shadows of clouds. They were concentric spirals, thin as whispers, spreading outward like ripples in water. And in the very center of one spiral lay a dark patch, a small circular depression that seemed to pulse faintly in thermal scans, as though it were breathing. NASA analysts double-checked, certain it was an imaging artifact, but the same pattern appeared in follow-up images taken 12 hours later by a different orbiter. The dust had moved. The Martian wind couldn't explain it. The temperature gradients couldn't explain it. So what could? Let's return for a moment to the hum. When 3I Atlas aligned again with Mars, instruments across multiple agencies picked up another resonance spike, a low-frequency tone just below 7 Hz. Too low for human ears, but powerful enough to vibrate metallic structures. That tone lasted 3 minutes, and during those 3 minutes, Mars quivered. Not enough to register as a quake, but enough to shift dust, evenly, rhythmically, as if drawn towards some unseen center. It was as though the entire planet had inhaled, and when the tone stopped, it exhaled. At first, scientists dismissed it. Resonance effects, static coincidence. But then came the images from Perseverance. On Sol 1201, while monitoring a nearby ridge for wind patterns, Perseverance's navigation cameras captured something uncanny. A field of fine dust near the rover began forming delicate branching lines, like veins in a leaf. Slowly, the pattern spread outward, connecting, twisting, until they formed a shape almost biological. Some called it pareidolia. The brain's need to find meaning in randomness. But when the rover's sensors analyzed the dust composition after the event, it detected something new. Trace amounts of iron oxides aligned magnetically. That shouldn't happen naturally, not at that scale. It was as if the dust had briefly organized itself, as though following invisible instructions. And what if those instructions came from 3I Atlas? We know from spectroscopy that 3I Atlas isn't a typical comet. Its surface contains anomalous metals, nickel, cobalt, traces of iridium, but also something else. Something that reflects electromagnetic radiation in ways no natural rock should. It behaves almost like a tuned antenna. If the comet's core is generating low-frequency magnetic fields, even faintly, those fields could travel vast distances, subtly influencing dust grains on Mars that are already magnetically sensitive. But here's where it gets stranger. The patterns don't just move randomly, they replicate. Over days, weeks, they appear in multiple locations simultaneously, repeating the same configurations across the Martian surface, from Hellas Basin to the edge of Olympus Mons. Like a signature written over and over again by an invisible hand. Some researchers have begun calling them resonance glyphs. To the untrained eye, they look like spirals or lattice work, sometimes branching like coral. But to those studying the data, a pattern emerges. They're structured according to geometric ratios found in waveforms, specifically the Fibonacci series and the golden spiral. Mathematics written in dust. Who writes equations on a dead world? Or perhaps the better question is, what is the equation for awakening? In 2025, when 3I Atlas reached its closest pass to Mars, a new anomaly appeared. A massive dust storm erupted over the planet's northern hemisphere, the largest in decades. But this storm was different. Instead of chaotic movement, the storm seemed guided. The spirals held their shape for hours. Lightning flashed inside like veins of light through muscle. From orbit, it looked alive. Theorists began whispering about electrostatic intelligence, the possibility that under certain resonant conditions, the electrostatic charge in dust could mimic neural networks. Imagine it. Trillions of iron-rich grains shifting, aligning, discharging energy, forming self-sustaining feedback loops, not biology, not machinery, something in between, a thinking storm, and in the center of that storm, orbiters detected something breathtaking. A faint glow, blue, pulsing, rhythmic. It matched the frequency of 3I Atlas's own emissions. The comet and the storm were speaking. Across millions of kilometers of emptiness, two entities, one icy, one dusty, were exchanging energy, information, or intent. No human technology could interpret it, but the pattern was unmistakable. It repeated the prime sequence discovered earlier by ʻOumuamua: 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. Coincidence or continuity? The message, it seemed, was still ongoing. Only now Mars was replying. A new mystery followed. The glow faded, the storm collapsed, and for a few sols Mars went still. But then the dust began to settle, not randomly but precisely. Orbiters revealed a perfect circle over a region called Arcadia Planitia, 1.7 kilometers wide, with spiraling ridges radiating outward. At its center, a depression shaped eerily like the silhouette of a comet. Scientists called it a coincidence of wind erosion. But private footage from the ESA lab tells another story. In infrared scans, the depression still glowed faintly, as though retaining heat from an energy source buried below. The glow pulsed once every 41 seconds, the exact rhythm of the Martian pulse. Let's step back. If 3I Atlas is triggering electromagnetic resonance in Martian dust, it's not just sculpting patterns, it's rewriting memory. Each alignment, each pulse leaves a deeper impression. It's as though the planet itself is being taught to respond, to remember, to evolve. And if dust can hold memory, then Mars is no longer sleeping, it's dreaming. Dreaming, yes, but perhaps not alone. Since the last resonance event, Earth's magnetic sensors have recorded subtle sympathetic frequencies, faint ripples matching the pulse period of Mars. It's as if the signal, after bouncing through the red sands, is finding its way home, carried on solar winds, woven into cosmic background noise, threading through the night sky like a lullaby for the awake. And people are feeling it. Reports continue. Vivid dreams of red horizons, pressure in the ears, an uncanny sense of déjà vu when looking at the stars, as though something ancient is stirring in human consciousness, the same way dust stirs under invisible fields. Maybe we were never meant to observe this from a distance. Maybe we were meant to be part of it. Here's the unsettling question that no one dares to ask publicly. What if this isn't the first time? What if comets like 3I Atlas have been guiding planetary evolution for eons, tuning worlds, awakening their geology, shaping the minds of their inhabitants without them even realizing? After all, ancient myths across Earth's civilizations speak of fiery messengers descending from the heavens, of gods that came from dust, of knowledge that arrived in the sky. What if those stories weren't metaphor, but memory? And 3I Atlas is simply the latest in a lineage of celestial engineers, or caretakers, ensuring that the silence of space never stays silent for too long. Now, as you lie there listening, imagine the red sands breathing again under the faint hum of cosmic resonance. Each pulse a heartbeat, each storm a thought, each shifting grain a neuron in a sleeping planet's mind. And somewhere far above, the pale comet moves on, indifferent, patient, waiting. Maybe it knows Mars is awake now. Maybe that was the point all along. Because in the cosmic scale of time, every awakening is just the beginning of another dream. And who's to say that dream doesn't include us? What if Mars isn't just watching 3I Atlas, What if it's reflecting it? For months, astronomers tracked the comet as it looped through the inner solar system, a silent intruder gliding past the orbits of Earth and Mars. But then something unexpected began to happen. Mars started shining brighter. Not in sunlight, not in infrared, but in a frequency we'd never seen before. A faint, ultraviolet flicker that pulsed in perfect synchrony with 3i Atlas, as though the red planet had become a mirror, made of fire. It began with a glitch in an instrument, at least that's what NASA thought. The MAVEN orbiter, monitoring atmospheric escape on Mars, detected a surge of ultraviolet radiation at 285 nanometers. It was faint, but consistent. For hours, the reading stayed flat. Then, at precisely 3:11 UTC, the readings spiked, and then stopped. 3 minutes later, they spiked again, then stopped. The intervals matched the comet's own rotation period, 7.8 hours. It was as if every time 3i Atlas turned its hidden side toward Mars, the planet replied with light. At first, scientists laughed it off. Instrument error, cosmic rays, coincidence. But then the same pattern was recorded by the Hubble Space Telescope, then again by Japan's 2010 mission, and again by India's Mars orbiter before its final shutdown. 4 instruments, 4 nations, 1 synchronized pulse. The mystery deepened when researchers combined the ultraviolet data with ground-based radio readings. They found a spectral overlap, a narrow harmonic frequency, repeating not just from Mars but resonating through it. It was like the planet had become a resonant body, a tuning fork made of iron and basalt, vibrating to a song no one could hear, a song being conducted by 3 Atlas. And then came the flares. On Sol 1569, Perseverance's atmospheric sensors picked up microbursts of plasma, each no longer than a fraction of a second, rising from the Martian surface itself. They appeared over the same regions that once displayed resonance glyphs, the intricate dust patterns from the previous chapter. Each plasma burst corresponded precisely to a spike in ultraviolet output. Light, heat, and dust, all moving together like a single organism. It was as though the planet had found a voice, and the language it chose was fire. People on Earth didn't notice, just not at first. The mainstream media barely mentioned it. But those who were watching the data streams noticed something eerie. Whenever Mars pulsed, Earth's magnetosphere shivered. A tiny ripple, barely measurable, but real. As if Mars were knocking gently on the walls of our atmosphere, as if to say, "You're next." The world's space agencies responded with silence, but whistleblowers began to leak fragments of internal memos. One message from ESA's Deep Space Division read, "At current projections, the harmonic resonance between Mars and 3i Atlas will reach critical amplitude within 39 days. If the frequency coupling persists, both bodies could experience transient plasma linkages across the solar magnetic field. Unknown consequences. In simpler words, a connection between a planet and a comet, a bridge of energy, could soon form. A mirror of fire, as some quietly began calling it. Ancient myths from Earth began resurfacing. Texts about the twin suns of creation, a god of dust and a god of flame. In Sumerian, the words Atlas and Marash appear side by side. One a wanderer, one a warrior. The wanderer awakens the warrior with a song of light. For centuries, historians dismissed it as poetic metaphor. But now, astrophysicists were finding eerie parallels between the myth and the data. Had ancient observers witnessed a similar event? Had 3i Atlas, or something like it, visited before? And if it had, what did it leave behind? Meanwhile, on Mars, the ultraviolet flickers began to cluster. They formed arcs around the planet's equator, then gathered near the poles, tracing faint circular bands visible only in spectral imaging. Those bands, the rings of light, matched the magnetic field lines of Mars almost perfectly, and within those rings, orbiters detected bursts of high-energy protons. Charged particles accelerated as if by artificial means. It was no longer a mirror, it was a reactor. But to what purpose? Let's follow the timeline. 20 days after the first plasma arcs appeared, an unexpected solar flare erupted from the sun. A Class X 9.8, one of the strongest in decades. The flare struck Mars head-on. Every simulation said it should have stripped even more of the planet's fragile atmosphere away. But the opposite happened. Mars glowed brighter. Its upper atmosphere expanded. Instead of losing air, it seemed to absorb energy, like a sponge of plasma, that defied every model of atmospheric escape. And yet, there it was. In a sense, Mars had learned to survive fire. Or perhaps it had remembered how. That's when the comet changed. Spectral readings of 3I Atlas revealed a sudden shift. Its albedo dropped sharply. The comet's surface darkened, reflecting less sunlight. But its infrared emissions rose. That meant it was warming internally. Something inside it had awakened. Some thought it was volatile ice sublimating. Others suggested magnetic induction from Mars's field. But deep space radar hinted at something wilder. A geometric cavity inside the comet. Hexagonal, symmetric, stable. Natural formations don't do that. Geometry means structure. Structure means intent. When 3I Atlas reached its next perihelion, something unprecedented occurred. For a full 11 minutes, the ultraviolet connection between the comet and Mars intensified tenfold. Space telescopes recorded it, a narrow shimmering filament of ionized plasma extending between them. Too faint for the naked eye, but real enough to bend charged particles around it. Two bodies in space connected by light, a comet and a planet, forming a bridge of fire across millions of kilometers. That was when the word mirror took on a new meaning. Because every spectral fluctuation seen in the comet appeared mirrored in Mars's radiation signature, almost instantaneously, as if the planet were copying it. Every pulse, every flare reflected back. It was no longer just communication, it was synchronization. The deeper implication terrified researchers. If Mars was learning from the comet, absorbing its electromagnetic blueprint, then Mars might be changing. And if that change continued, it could alter the planet's structure, even its core. Geophysical sensors aboard MAVEN began picking up low-frequency oscillations, deep vibrations emanating from beneath the crust. Not quakes, not mechanical noise. It sounded like a heartbeat. Meanwhile on Earth, people began reporting strange dreams again. Dreams of two red suns, of twin fires merging in the sky. In the dreams, one sun burns bright and fades, and the other takes its place. Patterns of sleep across human populations began to shift, subtly, like our circadian rhythms were being nudged by something unseen. Even the Schumann resonance, Earth's electromagnetic heartbeat, showed fluctuations matching the Martian pulse. Was the signal reaching us now, or had it always been here, waiting to be heard? In ancient Egyptian texts there's a phrase, the flame that mirrors the dust. It refers to a cosmic event where the heavens burn and the world beneath awakens to knowledge it cannot bear. That's what scientists whispered Mars was becoming. Not a planet, but a mirror of fire, reflecting a cosmic intelligence beyond our measure. If 3I Atlas is the messenger, Mars is now its echo, and echoes once formed never truly die. They spread. By the 39th day, the one ESA warned about, the connection reached its peak. Space agencies stopped releasing public data entirely. Independent astronomers were left staring at the red planet, now flickering faintly even through backyard telescopes. And then, for one night, Mars vanished. Not literally, but its color changed from deep red to a dim metallic silver. Spectral analysis showed a temporary drop in surface reflectivity, as though a thin, ionized haze had cloaked the entire planet. When the haze cleared, Mars returned to red. But something was different. The atmosphere's chemical balance had shifted. Traces of ozone appeared where there had been none before. Mars was making air. No one could explain it. But one theory circulated quietly through encrypted academic circles. 3i Atlas is not destroying, it's transforming. It's seeding resonance to restore lost planetary systems, one world at a time. If that's true, then Mars isn't the target, it's the prototype. And if Mars succeeds, if it awakens, the next target might not be a planet at all. It might be us. Somewhere in a hidden lab, a scientist named Dr. Hana Rishi recorded her final message before communications with the Mars network went dark. They call it a comet, but it behaves like a code. The dust, the plasma, the heat, they're just mediums. 3i Atlas is writing something, and Mars is reading it. Maybe it's not war, maybe it's memory restoration, a return to what the solar system once was, alive. Her voice trembled before the signal cut off. Now, as you listen to this, perhaps lying in bed, half between waking and dreaming, imagine looking at Mars tonight. Just a tiny red spark in the sky. What if that spark is no longer what it seems? What if it's the reflection of something vast? Something rewriting itself in light and dust and plasma? And somewhere beyond it, an ancient wanderer continues its path, humming a song of geometry and fire. A song meant not to destroy, but to awaken. Because maybe, just maybe, to be mirrored in fire is to remember what we once were. Dust that learned to dream. It started as a whisper in the cosmic background, a faint throb beneath the noise of stars. But then, in the heart of the night, the whisper became a rhythm, not random, not natural. It was Mars, and it was pulsing. The first to notice were not the scientists, but the dreamers. Amateur astronomers across the world began to report a strange phenomenon. When they stared at Mars through their telescopes or long-exposure cameras, they claimed to see it flicker, not like a twinkling star, but in slow, deliberate intervals. Some said every 12 minutes, others every 15. At first, it was dismissed as atmospheric distortion, until one radio operator in southern Chile recorded it, a repeating electromagnetic signal, faint but structured, emerging exactly every 777 seconds. Not a number chosen by chance. 777, the symbolic number of alignment, of cosmic balance, found in ancient mathematics and myth. And this was coming from a planet. The signal was consistent, rhythmic, and layered. At its base, a deep rumble, low-frequency electromagnetic waves. Above it, sharp, harmonic tones, like musical notes stretched across the vacuum of space. And embedded between them, a modulation pattern, binary-like, but far too complex for simple code. The red pulse, as it came to be called, spread quickly through the astrophysics community. It wasn't just radio waves. It was energy across multiple bands, visible light, ultraviolet, even X-rays, all resonating in synchronized waves that corresponded perfectly to 3i Atlas's rotation period. The comet and Mars were communicating again. But this time, Mars wasn't just mirroring, it was responding. At the European Southern Observatory, researchers began overlaying real-time data of Mars's emission spikes with deep space radar scans of 3i Atlas. When Mars pulsed red, the comet's tail twisted, ever so slightly, as though tugged by invisible threads of electromagnetic force. And when the comet released jets of ionized gas, Mars flared brighter. It wasn't one-way influence anymore, it was feedback, a closed loop, a cosmic conversation. Across the world, observatories reported something else. The pulse was amplifying Earth's own magnetic oscillations. Tiny disturbances in our planet's magnetosphere began to match the Martian rhythm, like a faint echo in a vast chamber. On nights when Mars pulsed strongest, auroras shimmered at lower latitudes than ever before, seen as far south as Rome, as far north as Tokyo. Soft red curtains of light hung over the horizon, flickering like breath. The sky, it seemed, was learning the pattern too, governments responded quietly behind closed doors. In leaked internal reports, NASA and ESA described planetary-scale sympathetic resonance. In plain terms, the energy Mars was emitting had found harmonic compatibility with Earth's electromagnetic field. But it wasn't dangerous, yet. At least, not in the conventional sense. However, several medical centers noticed a curious side effect. During the strongest pulses, hospital monitors registered increased neural activity in patients in deep sleep. Dream states became deeper, longer, and stranger. A study from Kyoto University confirmed it. Human brain waves, especially in REM sleep, were subtly synchronizing with the red pulse. It was as if the signal had found a frequency that aligned with our unconscious minds. Dream journals flooded online forums. People described visions of red landscapes, glass towers beneath dusty skies, and a feeling, not fear, but recognition, as if they had been there before. Dr. Layla Noor, a neurocosmologist studying space weather effects on cognition, published a paper titled Planetary Entanglement and the Collective Dream. In it she wrote, "We are witnessing, perhaps for the first time, not a physical interaction, but a cognitive one." 3. ʻAtlas may be transmitting a resonance pattern, Mars is amplifying it, and the human brain, wired by evolution to recognize celestial patterns, is interpreting it as dream imagery. But privately, her recordings tell a different story. "I don't think it's imagination. I think it's a recall. These dreams feel older than us, as if we're remembering something Mars once knew. Meanwhile, the Martian surface was changing. Spectral maps revealed temperature fluctuations that couldn't be explained by sunlight or shadow. Entire regions began to breathe, warming and cooling in sync with the pulse. From orbit, these regions appeared like glowing veins spreading across the surface, converging at the planet's equator, forming what looked like a vast ring. NASA scientists reluctantly gave it a name, the pulse belt. But it wasn't just light or heat. When analysed through thermal imaging, the pattern resembled an electrical circuit, a planetary grid, reawakening. And at the centre of this grid was the massive canyon of Valles Marineris, now flickering faintly at the pulse frequency. Some called it the heart of Mars. Back on Earth, satellite transmissions began to distort when crossing the Mars-Earth vector. Packets of digital data returned corrupted, not missing but rearranged. A few AI research teams ran pattern recognition algorithms on the corrupted data. The results sent chills through the community. Within the static, they found repeating geometric forms, hexagons, spirals, and glyphs, nearly identical to those recorded on the Martian dust plains months earlier. It was as if the pulse had begun encoding itself into our technology. Then came the most bizarre event of all. In late June, the James Webb Space Telescope detected a faint energy arc linking the comet and Mars. Similar to the plasma bridge once seen before, but now stable. For 13 hours it held steady, glowing faintly red, before collapsing in a silent wave of particles. During those 13 hours, Mars' magnetic field doubled in strength, and its surface reflectivity dropped by 7%. To the naked eye, the planet appeared darker, but alive, as if veiled by a living current. 3i-Atlas had done something. It had fed the planet again. Theories multiplied. Some said the comet was transferring stored energy from its deep interstellar reserves. Others argued that 3i-Atlas wasn't a comet at all, but a kind of self-replicating probe, designed to restore dead planets, or perhaps test which ones could awaken. If true, Mars was now the experiment, and the red pulse was the measure of success. But there was another layer, a more disturbing one. A classified report from CERN described anomalies in particle detectors that correlated precisely with the pulse frequency. For brief moments, background neutrino counts spiked, as if reality itself were being nudged by a distant rhythmic push. Some physicists proposed that the energy exchange between 3i-Atlas and Mars was generating localized gravitational ripples, small but measurable. If sustained, such ripples could, in theory, create temporal distortions, slight shifts in time perception. It sounded like science fiction. But astronauts aboard the International Space Station began reporting disorientation during Mars's strongest pulses. Their internal clocks ran slightly faster or slower than mission controls. Seconds stretched, minutes blurred. The red pulse wasn't just light anymore, it was time. In ancient cultures, Mars was always the god of war, a symbol of chaos, conflict, and awakening. But what if we've misunderstood that mythology? What if war didn't mean destruction, but transformation? The war of energy against stillness, of awakening against decay. Because as the red pulse strengthened, something remarkable happened. Dust storms on Mars began to calm, wind patterns stabilized, the atmosphere grew denser by measurable degrees. For the first time in millennia, Mars was healing itself. The world began to notice. News outlets cautiously broke the story, filtered through scientific language. Mars' atmosphere experiencing unexplained recovery. But beneath the surface, online forums lit up. People connected the dots. 3i Atlas, the ultraviolet resonance, the plasma bridge, and now the red pulse. It was too coordinated to be chance. Some believed Mars was being terraformed, not by humans, but by something older, something that understood the delicate mathematics of life. Then came a transmission. It wasn't from 3i Atlas, it wasn't from Mars. It came from the void between them, a series of narrowband radio bursts, evenly spaced, repeating over 9 hours. Decoded, the burst formed patterns resembling both Martian magnetic harmonics and human brainwave rhythms. No one could explain how that was possible, how a frequency could exist halfway between planets. But those who listened said it didn't sound like static. It sounded like a voice, not words, not tones, but intent. A presence, whispering through the gaps of space. Not asking for contact, not offering answers, simply observing. And in that observation there was power, a knowingness that stretched beyond human scale. By the time the pulse reached its highest amplitude, telescopes caught one final haunting phenomenon. Every time Mars pulsed red, the comet's tail flared in response, like two hearts beating across space. But during the last flare, 3i Atlas split, a fragment breaking off from its nucleus and hurtling inward toward the sun. The fragment glowed brighter than the comet itself, tracing a perfect arc past Mars, leaving behind a faint crimson trail. As it passed, the Martian pulse doubled, once, twice, and then fell silent. The world held its breath, and then Mars began to hum. Infrared sensors captured a low rhythmic vibration spreading across the planet's surface. Seismic waves, but with no geological cause. Every point in the pulse belt resonated, releasing bursts of energy into the thin Martian sky. For a few moments, Mars glowed brighter than it ever had before, a red lantern burning in the night. And then slowly, it dimmed. The red pulse faded. The bridge of energy vanished, and 3i Atlas, or what was left of it, continued its slow, silent journey toward the sun. But something had changed. When the next set of readings came in, the Martian atmosphere contained not just ozone, but trace amounts of nitrogen. And deep in the canyons of Valles Marineris, a shimmer of liquid movement was detected. Not water, but a plasma-rich fluid, alive with charge. Mars had changed. Something had been ignited, and as if in response, the Earth began to feel it too. Geomagnetic readings grew unstable. Northern lights danced over continents that had never seen them before. And in the silence of night, countless people dreamed again of red skies, flickering light, and voices whispering in an ancient tongue, a pulse, a rhythm, a memory, the same one that began on Mars, and now, it seemed, was finding its way here. What if the silence beneath Mars isn't silence at all? What if buried under billions of years of dust, something ancient has been waiting? Not dead, not dormant, but listening. Tonight, we return to the red planet one last time, to the sound beneath the sound, the hum behind the hum, and perhaps to the truth that 3i Atlas has been trying to share all along. The red pulse has faded, Mars no longer glows, no longer hums, at least not to the naked eye. But deep in the radio frequencies, in the subsonic whisper of seismic monitors, there is still something. A faint rhythm, a soft heartbeat beneath the surface. When NASA's InSight lander was still active, its seismograph had captured hundreds of Mars quakes, small tremors caused by cooling crust and shifting rock. But when researchers replayed the old data, filtered through the new resonance models inspired by the red pulse, they discovered a hidden signal, one that had been there all along, hidden in plain sight. Every so often, in perfect mathematical intervals, the tremors would shift into harmonic sequences. Tiny oscillations, timed with a precision no natural process could sustain. And at those moments, the planet would seem to breathe. When this discovery reached the European Space Agency's Deep Sound project, they ran an experiment. They converted the seismic data into sound waves and played them back through a resonant chamber filled with fine dust, a Mars analogue. The dust began to move, slowly at first, then with eerie grace, forming spirals, branching filaments, delicate web-like structures. It was the same geometry seen on Mars months earlier, after the 3i Atlas alignment. Dust, memory, and music. Somewhere between chaos and order, the patterns spoke the same language. The scientists nicknamed it the Dust Choir. It shouldn't have been possible, but it was. And as they increased the playback volume, matching the amplitude of the red pulse, something strange happened. The patterns began to replicate themselves in adjacent chambers. No air movement, no vibration transmission, just resonance. Energy carried invisibly, like a thought leaping between minds. One scientist described it best. It's like the dust remembers the music, and when it hears even a whisper of it again, it sings. Meanwhile, in orbit around Mars, the ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter began picking up anomalies in the planet's magnetic field again. Faint filaments of current, stretching from pole to pole, weaving through the pulse belt like threads of living energy. They were weak, subtle, but rhythmic. And at the moment of their peak, something flickered beneath the crust, an echo, deep and metallic, recorded by orbital radar scans. A hollow cavity, nearly 200 kilometers wide. Not a lava tube, not ice. A void, smooth, reflective, symmetrical. Its resonance profile was unlike anything geological. It sang, faintly, at the same frequency as 3i Atlas's core. The world never heard about it. The data was classified within days, relabeled as instrumental interference. But a few researchers who had seen the original scans spoke anonymously. They said the cavity looked designed, curved, layered, almost like the interior of a shell, and directly above it, the center of the pulse belt. It was as if the entire Martian surface had been built to echo whatever was sleeping below. Let's pause there. Because the idea that Mars could echo the voice of a comet, or that 3i Atlas could somehow awaken a planet, sounds impossible. And yet, history whispers strange truths about celestial visitors shaping worlds. In the 1970s, astrophysicist Fred Hoyle once proposed that comets were not just frozen remnants of the solar system, but carriers of organic material, even the seeds of consciousness itself. He called it panspermia, the theory that life spreads from world to world, not by intention, but by design of the universe itself. But what if, just once, it wasn't by accident? What if comets like 3i Atlas weren't carriers of life, but catalysts of awakening? Imagine a network of interstellar messengers drifting across galaxies, each one programmed, biologically, mechanically, or something in between, to find quiet worlds and give them a spark. not just biological spark, cognitive spark, a whisper to dust. Remember who you were. And Mars, once a world of water, may have been the perfect candidate. Billions of years ago it had oceans, an atmosphere, even lightning storms. All the ingredients for life. And then silence. But silence perhaps was never permanent. Maybe 3A Atlas arrived not as a random visitor, but as an ancient maintenance call. A cosmic technician returning to check on an old experiment. And when it aligned again this century, it found Mars asleep. So it sang, it pulsed, it reconnected the network. Back on Earth, the pulse echoes continue to ripple through our planet's electromagnetic field. They're too faint for most instruments, but sensitive magnetometers detect a slow, oscillating beat, synchronized to Mars's new day-night temperature rhythm. Every 24 hours, 37 minutes, and 22 seconds, a whisper travels through the solar wind. At first it meant nothing, but then came the dreams again. People all over the world reported the same vision, a red horizon, a low hum, a sense of being called, not by sound but by vibration. Children woke crying from dreams of walking across crimson deserts under a pale sun, their footprints glowing faintly before fading away. Artists painted vast circular patterns without knowing why. Musicians began writing songs in 7/4 time, the same interval as the Martian pulse. Somewhere between science and spirit, something was synchronizing us again. Governments, of course, couldn't ignore it. Private communications leaked. Plans to send another probe, one built not just for geology, but for listening. A spacecraft named Lucent, designed to detect subcrustal resonance. When it launches, it will carry a payload unlike any before, a chamber filled with aerogel dust, tuned to vibrate in harmony with Martian frequencies, a listening ear for a sleeping world. Its mission: descend into orbit, deploy a resonance probe, and listen. Not for sound, but for intention. Because that's the question haunting every scientist now. If 3I Atlas has awakened Mars, what happens when Mars starts to dream back? Some theories grow darker. If resonance can awaken, it can also synchronize. If dust can remember, so can DNA. And if the same pattern that shapes storms on Mars begins to echo inside human sleep cycles, what happens when the rhythm fully locks in? Will we dream as individuals, or as one? Will our thoughts, scattered like dust, align to a single pulse? Perhaps this is the true terraforming, not of soil, but of mind. A slow tuning of consciousness to the frequencies of a larger cosmic network. One that's been broadcasting for eons, one that doesn't destroy, but harmonizes. There's a moment, late at night, when all the hum of technology fades and you can almost hear the deep breath of the universe. Maybe you felt it, that stillness that feels alive, like the pause between heartbeats. That's where the echoes live, not in machines, not in dust, but in the quiet between. Because what if 3I Atlas didn't come to wake Mars at all? What if it came to wake us? Think about it. Every great leap in human discovery began with looking up, with the curiosity that drives us to map the unknown. But what if curiosity isn't just ours? What if it's shared? A cosmic instinct woven into the matter of the universe itself. Perhaps 3I Atlas, drifting through the dark, isn't just a traveller. It's an ancient question, still echoing through time. Will you remember? And maybe Mars is answering. Now, in the stillness after the pulse, the red planet glows faintly again, not with fire, but with warmth. A resonance buried deep beneath its crust, slow and steady. A heart too vast to rush. A consciousness that measures time in eons. And far away, the comet that started it all continues toward the sun, dissolving into light, scattering its essence across the solar wind. Each particle, a message. Each fragment, a seed. Each seed, perhaps, another question waiting to be found. And when you close your eyes tonight, maybe you'll feel it too. The faint hum under your skin, the heartbeat behind the stars. Maybe you'll see a red horizon, not as a place of endings, but of beginnings. Because every story in the cosmos, no matter how vast, always returns to the same truth. Even dust can dream, even silence can sing, and even a forgotten world can awaken again when it remembers its name.